about the
Recording in
revenue sharing
progress.
between a city and its entities, including how much is returned to the entities to ensure that there's operational and financial sustainability. Next slide. Thanks, Chair. My colleague will present the next slide on the Metro Trading Services, Mr. Sydney Marcella. Thank you, Sydney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Willem. So the point that we're making here is that for City to get into the troubles that it's facing, they need to implement what the national government has instituted, which is one of the national reform, which is led by a different ministry, Department of Water and Sanitation, Department of Energy and Electricity, and DFFE, as well as National Treasury, which is a trading services reform. And what we mean by this, is that trading services are services which consumption-related services are levied, which basically we are talking about electricity, water, sanitation, and solid waste management. And these trading services basically should be run in such a way that a tariff should be determined and managed with the intentions to make the surpluses when they deliver the services, because that surplus is basically, it's used basically for capital investments and other business improvements, which are required for long-term viability of entities such as Johannesburg Water. But secondly, as my colleague has highlighted, Willem, is that this also contributes towards the property rates account, by ensuring that the other services that the municipality provides to the residents, at least it's able to finance them, given that only about less than 10% of the national revenue is distributed to the municipalities. But only what's important. It's
my apology. We are live streaming. There is a lot of people that is interested in this. Is it possible for you to just put on your screen whilst you are speaking? Thank you.
My camera, I think it's on. I'm not sure whether it's on your side.
You can just move your camera down.
I'll need to join on a different link.
Okay, but it's fine. You can continue like that. That's fine.
Okay, thanks. So, as we were saying, Chair, that basically public and community services, on the other hand, basically that there are those services that relies on the property rates revenue. We're talking about health, community housing, development, governance, administrative, and the planning, as well as other things such as security, or what we'll call the metropolis in the municipal space, which basically they are depending on that. So what we have seen over time is that municipalities are in what we call this municipal spiral. They require urgent intervention because they are in what we call a negative reinforcing loop, where we have a long-term underinvestment, which has led to the decline in the services. In the case of Johannesburg Water, as we are explaining, whereby basically you see the water leaks and so forth. And that has led to the decline in cash revenue, given that the municipality is not able to trade at all times. And as a result of not being able to trade, the revenue then start to decline quite significantly. What is equally important is that this has basically, we are starting to see an identified inefficiency and under-resourced municipal service providers, where we are estimating that within the metro space, it's in excess of 25 billion rand. And what does this mean? It means that there's less money for maintenance and investment, and this keep on reinforcing being in a reinforcing loophole that we are facing. And what is the core of the problem? Part of the problem is that of what we call the split in responsibility, which is on the left-hand side, where basically the municipalities are running trading services such as Johannesburg Water like a department, where they focus on asset creation, asset maintenance, and operation. But when it comes with the things like customer trust, customer satisfaction, finances, and HR, or what we call corporate-related functions, including the finance, those are run at the corporate level, and they are not run within the entity itself or within the business unit. This creates a very split role of responsibility, which create a problem, given that now this core entities such as Johannesburg Water are not run like a business, they are not run in an integrated way. And basically, what we are envisaging is that this type of entities are quite a large infrastructure-intensive operation, which must be managed as an integrated utility approach, where asset creation, asset maintenance, and operation, and customer trust and satisfaction and sound finances are managed as one, basically. In the next slide. So what we are highlighting in the next slide is that pumping money into this is not a panacea to the problems. Grants are limited, and due to government's financial position and the economy that we are faced with, that's not a viable option. And also what we have identified, and as we have highlighted, existing grants are of a poor value for money, whereby there is a lot of inefficiencies in the system which can be arrested. And therefore, putting more money into the system basically will be tantamount to basically pouring money into a leaking bucket. As we are estimating that about more than 60 billion of the grants basically are directed to the sector. So the changes are needed, and basically effective change management is required together with wise and efficient investment choices that we need to basically make. And what we know is that these infrastructure investments that are required in the municipal space and for running entities like Johannesburg Water, they are quite expensive and they require money, and therefore that change that is associated with this, it's quite required. In the next slide, so what we are emphasizing here in this slide is that there is quite a clear alignment at the national level on the policy direction as to how to save these critical services. In the medium-term development plan 2024-29, basically the Operation Vulindlela in particular, which has basically elevated local government reform priorities. And part of it is to shift to a utility model for water and electricity services to ensure financial and operational sustainability of the services, but also to standardize and professionalize the appointment of the senior managers in local government. More in particular, when you run entities like Johannesburg Water and City Power, where basically you will need the people that have an engineering and a business acumen to run those entities. And also the review of institutional structure of the local government is in place, and the review of local government fiscal framework, including the conditional grant. Without necessarily going into all the sectors, I'll just focus on the sectors that basically affect you. More in particular, within the Water and Sanitation Department, there are a number of things that the department has done in relation to basically driving this. Part of it is the revival of the Green Drop and Blue Drop reports, and also the amendment of Water Service Act, basically, which require the separation of the Water Service Authority and Water Service Provider. It's quite critical for this, and it's going to be quite important for the Parliament to support this process as we are going forward. And as we said, there are a number of other sector departments which are basically complementing this work in the National Treasury on the review of conditional grants, in the Department of the Energy and Electricity on the EDI reform, including in the Department of Forestry and Fishery, and the COCTOM in particular, local government white papers, and the review of Section 78 process, which basically is quite critical for a sector such as water and sanitation. The next slide. So what basically we're saying, and in particular on the separation of water service provider and water service authorities, you need to basically, as part of the reform, we have instituted what we call the minimum commitment and the performance indicators for the sector, where basically you have you need to have what we call the SPOMA, the single point of management authority, where you have also the service compact for the between the service authority and the service provider. And also you need to have financial performance indicators for the sectors instead of just looking at it in isolation. And also accountability performance indicators such as capital budget execution, the procurement transparency, and also the customer survey to check as to whether what is the level of customer satisfaction. But also we need to have the operational performance indicators, which are basically we need to monitor quite closely as part of the reform, to check the progress of each municipality as to whether is it performing optimally. And those are some of the water security, the blue drop, the green drop, the final effluent quality, and as well as a number of things, the non-revenue water, the metering performance in the municipality. So these are what we call the minimum indicators, which are quite critical for the success of the sector, and they are quite also critical for what you can call a ring-fencing element. They support that part as well. So in the next slide, we just show the relationship between the 8 minimum commitments, or more in particular, as we separate between the service authority and the service provider. And this is quite critical. Basically, what you need is to ensure that some of the functions that are provided in the service authority are quite clear, but the role of the service provider also needs to be delineated, and the minimum commitments basically are assisting us with respect to that as we work with the sector departments around that. And critical of that is to have a service compact. How does the WSP perform actually, where the service authority basically is able to measure that. And that will be quite critical when the licensing of the WSP kicks in, because then you will need to have some sort of a measure where you delineate as to what is the service provider and what is the service authority. And also the delegation of the person that is appointed as a head of the service provider. But also equally important is the budget support, because it's quite critical for the service authority to give the service provider a necessary, water service provider, the necessary budget support so that they can implement the necessary investments that are required in the sector to turn around the sector itself. And that it will ensure that the financial and the business model that basically the service provider is basically running are quite sustainable, and they are just not as pie in the sky, but there's an agreement around those things. So as we conclude, basically, we're saying the National Treasury, working with the national government, the next slide, has basically worked has recognized the deteriorating state of infrastructure platform that is driving the decline in the performance of this key trading services such as Johannesburg Water. And therefore, this is an evidence in an increased operational inefficiencies that we have seen, and also the decline in service quality and reliability, and a decline in cash revenue, as well as a progressively lesser investment into the sector in particular. And we have also seen the decline in this decline is actually negatively affecting the economic growth, because in the cases of their cities also, their financial sustainability is highly affected. In terms of the economic growth now, what you start to see is that there is no reason for investors basically to locate in our cities from other parts of the world, because the water performance of our water trading entities such as Johannesburg Water is not at a peak level, and therefore will not necessarily attract the investment. And that's part of the problems that we are seeing at the macroeconomic level, is partly because of the things that are happening in the municipal space. But also equally important, the financial challenges in the municipalities are also linked to the inability to run entities such as Johannesburg Water adequately, given that they need to be quite efficient and generate sufficient surpluses that the municipality can be able to use those resources adequately as well. So to this end, National Treasury, also working with various sector departments at the national level, has initiated reforms to reform trading services in the metropolitan municipalities as a starting point through performance-based financial incentive to reward good decisions and performance. And also equally important is that conditions that will enable success for this reform have been set out and communicated through the Division of Revenue Act and various guidance notes that have been released. And lastly, the metros municipalities seeking to access the performance-based incentives grant will need to ensure that basically they conform to the minimum requirements that have been set out, and also configure into a viable businesses, and likely in the form of a business unit or municipal entity in this regard. And in the next slide, as we conclude here, we are saying the City of Johannesburg has commenced with the implementation of the reform by addressing organizational and structural and the capacity development. Part of that, how they have done it, is through absorbing relevant functions and personnel from the COJ core to eliminate mandate duplication with both rolling out change management programs to ensure effective workforce. As my colleague has highlighted, in the Q1, they've already improved on the performance in relation to the finances, because they were people that they took from Johannesburg Water around 2010 and put them into the core. Now they took those people back into the Johannesburg Water, and that you start to see the performance in an improvement in the collection rate in the entities. The second one is that they are implementing a structured employee transfer change management program to integrate operational staff effectively as part of that. And it's quite important to coherently support the metros with this clear reform program, which require the various elements to be coordinated in an integrated approach. As we said, that basically in the minimum commitments and the performance improvements as well, and the financial as well, are quite critical. And that will include the quality of the governance and the management that you instill in these institutions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for both the presentations. Minister, would you, before we go to questions, would you and the department want to comment on this or highlight something to the committee on this report?
No, thank you so much, our chairperson of the portfolio committee and members, the DG and the team from Auditor General of South Africa, led by Sister Bello, and also the team from National Treasury. As a department, we are working jointly with the National Treasury. Minister Gotoman, about a few weeks ago, was able to convene all the metros as part of the reforms that are being rolled out with respect to metro trading services. That includes issues of water and sanitation and electricity. My apology, Chairperson, I happen to be another country. People just decide to phone here. That meeting was attended by Deputy Minister of Finance, Saropen, and myself, and Deputy Minister Siklulu, supporting the minister. All our mayors were there. They've confirmed that this support program, including the incentive that National Treasury is putting in place, is a best opportunity, Chairperson, like we've presented in the 7th administration, that the issues of trading services is an important aspect because it gives institutional autonomy, it improves issues of governance, but it also deals with issues of prudence of financial management and asset management, because those resources should be in a position to be ring-fenced, so that at least they can go back into that particular aspect. Equally, Chairperson, the amendments or the reforms in the legislation in terms of the Water Services Act actually started to say our decision to professionalize and have proper water utilities that will ultimately be having performance-based contracts and licensing in terms of Section 19 and Section 20 of the Water Services Act will go a long way, because in the current form, this implementation model by many of our municipalities, including the City of Johannesburg, has proved to be ineffective and inefficient. Therefore, managing it as a business entity is the way to go. We know now that the portfolio committee and ourselves have intervened, that Johannesburg, in terms of its own growth, there's been an underinvestment for quite some time. And that underinvestment for quite some time, what they are making as a provision from the current monies that they are receiving, is not adequate, in as much as we know that some work is happening now in terms of the Gauteng Secure Partnership that we have brought in by ourselves as a department, supported by the DG, working with the World Bank, DBSA, but more importantly, the Presidential Working Group. If these decisions, Chairperson, are implemented with a level of prudence and agility, they will go a long way to stabilize the situation, because the situation in Johannesburg will remain vulnerable for quite some time because of the decay of that particular infrastructure. There are some investments that are being made, but they are inadequate. And the report is currently been capturing. In other words, we have the report from DWS, the report from AGSA, and other experts that are helping that indicates the challenges they face. We are expecting the mayor, as he has promised, that at least by the next financial year, more resources will actually be invested back, in as much as they're using that sweeping arrangement into the main account. And we expect them that at least early next in their financial year, when it starts, a full ring fencing, Chairperson, has to happen. Well, the other decision they'll have to make is how much money are they putting back into what? Remember the quantum and what they are billing every month and what they are putting back still look little bit disproportionate, and we're calling for more investment. In as much as we know that other services or other accounts or other spending centers are reliant on the money from electricity and water, but the biggest guzzler of these resources remain electricity. Therefore, the deadline that Minister Kotongwane gave them to conclude these plans and turnaround plans, conclude all those particular issues, we'll continue to support and monitor them, like we're also doing with other metros like eThekwini and others. That will be my remark, Chairperson, on this presentation, where the good engagement at a particular point on the report on water provision with the Auditor General, and we're very pleased that they are looking at these particular issues. I'll request that you can give Comrade Sean the DG maybe 3 or 4 minutes also to add, Chairperson. But I can see that we have to congratulate you as a portfolio committee on the high levels of holding us accountable. Because this is not the first time you're engaging about this particular city. If I'm not mistaken, it will be the 3rd or the 4th time after you did your own engagement. And we're here, at least we're very confident that even legislators, ourselves, communities and experts and NGOs, if we all make this issue our issue, we should be able to turn our cities around. Thank you.
Thank you, DG.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good afternoon to you and honourable members and colleagues and everyone else online. Chairperson, I co-chair the Water and Sanitation Working Group of the Presidential Johannesburg Working Group, the Water and Sanitation Workstream, with the Chief Executive of Johannesburg Water. So we have regular meetings together with representatives of civil society and of business in Johannesburg, where we review progress with implementation of the turnaround strategy by Johannesburg Water. And we are still getting reports in that meeting from Johannesburg Water that they continue to have challenges paying their contractors who are doing important capital projects to address the underlying causes of the water supply disruptions that have been happening in Johannesburg, such as upgrading reservoirs, improving pumping stations, repairing reservoirs, etc. And that as a result of that, there are instances where contractors have stopped work or contractors have left site. And we are informed in the meeting by Johannesburg Water that the reason for that is that Johannesburg Water has been unable to pay the contractors because they don't have sufficient funds in their account, which is caused by the sweeping arrangement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. With that said, we'll go over the questions, and I would lead the question to the Auditor General. On your page 6, you talk about there's enough cash held by Johannesburg Water, but I would like to not to differ from you, but that is a loan account. We had engagement with Johannesburg Water, and firstly, they said there's nothing like 4 billion, and eventually they had to concede that they hold a loan account of 4 billion. And we said, can you transfer that 4 billion now to Johannesburg Water? And the answer was no. So, Auditor General, you need to explain your statement to say that the cash held by Johannesburg Water is, there's sufficient money, but there's no funds to fund that loan account. So that is a balance sheet figure and not in real terms cash that is available. And that is where I also have a problem on page 5 of your presentation, that bullet 6, where you say that the sweeping only contributes to 30%. And with our engagements with them, it was more than 90. It was seemed like it's more than 90%, because when they need to pay a contractor, they must go on their knees and beg for money to be transferred from Johannesburg, the COJ account, to their account when it's available. Therefore, I would like you to give us insight on that. And then my second question would be to National Treasury. We 100% believe that you're 100% correct as well, that they run it as departments and not as a business. Is there no way that we can short circuit the entity to be run as a business? Because the impression that the committee got when we visited Johannesburg Water is that we are looking at, we don't have time frames. We can't tell you when the council will take that decision. Is there not anything from Treasury side that we can force them to short circuit this, or to enhance the transfer, or to a business unit, the way they're dealing with that now? That will be my two questions, and if you answer that, the following colleagues will then ask questions. So can I ask Treasury maybe to answer, and Auditor General? Maybe Auditor General first.
Thank you, Chair. When we highlighted the cash available, we were highlighting that at the end of the year, the cash is positive. So we are seeing the positive cash flow, which is 4 billion, which is sitting in the sweeping account. However, we are highlighting that it's not that the amount is sitting in the bank account of J Water, but is sitting at the city, where then on a daily basis, Johannesburg Water would then have to request COJ in terms of the amounts when they need to pay the suppliers. We did engage management in this, and that they do get payments from COJ, but they do not get it as and when they request it. Sometimes they are delayed, or there is where COJ then will then not send the required amount. And then when it comes to the part where you speak to, where we said only 30% related to the sweeping account issues. So as per the audits in the prior year, when we issued the finding relating to Johannesburg Water not being able to pay its suppliers on time, based on our sample that we have audited, we did an exercise as to assess the root cause of non-payment. And 30% of our sample showed that it was due to the sweeping agreement that they have with the city, and 70% related to its own deficiencies. This is based on sample base. We do not audit fully the entire population. So this exercise, we did it both with management, and they did agree to the finding based on the sample that we tested. In the current year, we issued the same finding, and we are still currently assessing in the current year how much percentage relates to the sweeping arrangement that they have with the city.
Thank you. AG? National Treasury, my apology.
Thank you, Chair. So in the case of Johannesburg, we should be able to, as we work as a collective, be able to assist them to ensure that by the next financial year, they fully run as an entity, given that most of the things are in place in Johannesburg. What we need, basically, one of the critical things is to have the quality of the boards as well, and also to have a service compacts which are practical in terms of ensuring that the issue around how much the revenue sharing are addressed quite adequately in those service compact. But as we say, those service compact, you need a management and the boards that basically understand exactly what they are doing in terms of putting up the service compacts around that, because it's a negotiation instrument, basically, that will ensure that the roles that the board plays and the management in the Joburg Water, for example, it's adequately addressed in the service compact, and that service compact also, it needs to be an agreement between the city and the Joburg Water to ensure that the things that they have agreed upon, then they are in place. So we are at the period where they are in the process of drafting. I think by the beginning of December, they will be starting drafting the service compact, which then needs to be adopted before the beginning of the financial year, and would be quite critical that basically that service compact, it talks to all these critical issues which will make Joburg Water to become a fully fledged entity that we wish that it should be. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that responses. Honorable Ditewe.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Okay, I will switch off my video hereafter. Thank you. Chairperson, thanks to AGSA and National Treasury. Perhaps back to National Treasury. Why plot the whole period, the 20-year period from 2002 to 2022? We are now in 2025. Within a period of 2 to 3 years, a lot can happen, in particular if one takes into account the introduction of the metro trading services, where, for example, JW and other such entities will be treated and run as utilities along business model lines. Perhaps if you could apprise us as to why it is that you limit it to 20 years instead of going all the way. Perhaps still that might be important to tell us what happened significantly within that period of time, but the outer period, I think, in my view, is also important, especially if you look at the concluding part of the presentation of National Treasury on the reforms that City of Joburg has begun to embrace against the background of the intervention of the presidency there, working with a whole range of stakeholders, including business, etc. If that could be done. Now, there being chairperson from the report, a surplus from time to time in respect of Joburg Water, which is a completely different story with regards to the City Power, Pick It Up, and other such entities. I'd like to know, when we talk of the 4 billion rand, and this goes back to the question that you asked and was answered by AGSA, the 1.8 billion rand surplus on the part of JW against the 4 billion rand. This 4 billion rand that we are talked about, that's being swept into the main account of City of Joburg, is it wholly attributable to revenue collected by Joburg Water? To the extent, for example, that others have shown or have reported deficits, unlike Joburg Water. Now, this question can be answered either by National Treasury or Joburg, or rather AGSA. Chairperson, the last one. It seems to me, Chairperson, that if these trade-in services were to be effected, there would be a huge turnaround. Now, with regards to the sweeping account, what exactly is it that National Treasury in particular, or even AGSA, would recommend be done? I've seen the part where National Treasury, flags problematic areas with regards to this arrangement. As we know, when we were on oversight in Johannesburg, the city told us that this arrangement goes back to 2002. And we would like to know, what is it that could be done to ensure that it does not have a deleterious effect on such entities as Joburg Water or any of their entities, particularly in light of the fact that these entities must now start to be run rather by like utilities along business models. So, Chairperson, those would be my questions on the presentations. Thank you.
Can I start with the AG?
Thank you, Chair. So, in terms of the recommendations, at this point, we have not had upfront recommendations. However, is that the arrangement that the city have with Johannesburg Water goes way back, where looking at how this 4 billion is disclosed, it is disclosed as a loan, of which then COJ, when it also wants to provide service delivery in the city, it also subsidizes other entities. So looking at that, the arrangement as well works in that way. The other entities are at a deficit. The city is still able to provide its services. However, when you're looking at Johannesburg Water specifically, when then they would want to request these funds and they are not provided on time, it also impacts as well the way that they do their business. Someone did speak to where suppliers are then, in terms of their projects, are delayed as the money doesn't come as and when the city delivers that. So the city as a whole needs to consider what best works in such that they are able to provide services all around. So we cannot be specific and say that the amount should all go to Johannesburg Water, or the city should consider another arrangement. However, the arrangement should be in a way that it best serves the citizens on the ground as intended by the metro. Thanks, Chair.
National Treasury.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'll start, and my colleague Willem will come. And I think some of these questions with the colleagues from Water Affairs, they can be able to complement us. So I think the critical things to say is that the reform basically was precipitated by the fact that there are challenges in the sectors. So when you talk about 20 years ago, for example, Johannesburg Water was run quite efficiently with a management contractor being part of that, and it became a best utility model as to how to run things. Unfortunately, over time, those things basically were the good things that were happening in Johannesburg Water, then they removed them to the core. The same thing can be said with eThekwini as well, where basically they had a business unit and that business unit was collapsed. So I think 20 years ago, things were run way better than how things are now. And as a result of the collapse that we have seen, then it really led to basically analyzing what is the problem and being able to diagnose it, working with the sector departments and being clear that this is a route to go, working with various national sector departments to basically arrest the decline. Thanks.
Honorable Dictebe.
Oh, thank you, Chairperson. Well, the context to my question is obviously exactly how is it Mr. Maisela has answered, but I thought that in spite of the 20-year period, and he's basically given us the context, the last 2 or 3 years with regards to improving things against the background of what has begun to be seen as a decline would also be more important for us. But lastly, Chairperson, earlier on we, as you know, engaged with the department and the water boards, and of course, one of the water boards, the quintessential model of good governance being Rand Water, which happens to provide alongside Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, 76% of its water to Joburg, the City of Johannesburg, indicated that they are using AI just to assist them in terms of management of finances and so forth. So if indeed some 2 decades ago, in the absence even of these AI innovations and interventions, the city could run things as efficiently as we are told. Certainly, there being these kinds of innovations today in the field of artificial intelligence that certainly should be considered, because the city's jurisdiction is very huge. It serves a very huge population and so forth. So those would be my comments, Chairperson. And indeed, as DM has said, we keep an eye on what's going on. Unlike in other municipalities, Chairperson, I think we have begun to see a very positive response and keen interest on the part, in particular, of political leadership. This does not mean that there is now the situation is hunky-dory or that there are no challenges. There are challenges, but we've seen keen interest to turn things around, and I think we must bring the pressure to bear on them continuously, and so that would help. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honourable Moore.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentations to National Treasury and AGSA. Chair, I have more than 3 questions, but I'll ask my first 3. But first, I'd like to just give some context. Based on the Deputy Minister around our extensive engagement on Joburg, I think the reality is that 10% of South Africans live in Joburg, and Joburg accounts for half of Gauteng's GDP production, and Gauteng accounts for about 1/3 of the country's. So essentially 1 in every 6 rands that's generated in our country is generated in Joburg. It's not like any other city. It is the economic hub of our country. and it absolutely must succeed. And I think from these presentations, we can see at current, it isn't succeeding. And whilst that's certainly not DWS's fault, it is a very real problem that is facing the entire country. And so Joburg deserves additional scrutiny as we try and fix this, although I think also these issues are replicated in other places. So from my side, to first a couple of questions to the AGSA. I'd like to ask, does the city, I mean, I understand my chairperson asked a similar question, but I'll ask you to listen for the differentiation. Does the city of Joburg really have Joburg Water's 4 billion rand? Because Joburg Water definitely doesn't have it, and we understand it's been swept to the city. But there seem to be very significant challenges accessing that cash. And was it actual cash in the bank? It should surely be accessible. So from AGSA's side, I'd like clarity that you feel comfortable that the city is indeed sitting on at least that 4 billion rand in cash, and that isn't merely a notation in a credit line somewhere. The second question is regards to the invoices. You mentioned the 30%, 70% in terms of your checking. Does the AGSA differentiate between small and large invoices? As there is a world of difference between an invoice from JRA, for instance, for a reinstatement of a pothole or a broken pipe, and a multi-million rand invoice on a critical infrastructure project like those being delayed in the commando system. And Chair, just for your information, I visited the Brixton site again that we'd visited that was going to be finished by October. I visited it at the beginning of this month, and they had again not been paid. The project again had not been completed, and they were only hoping to sort of finish it by the end of the month. Actual completion has been moved out. And then a question to National Treasury. Is the manner in which the sweeping arrangement is being run by the City of Johannesburg in line with National Treasury policy or guidelines on sweeping? Because your presenter actually mentioned it was being done in the best interests of residents, but as a Joburger myself, the sweeping of water and power money away from the accounts, causing sweeping water and power outages across the city does not appear to be in the best interests of my fellow residents. Thank you, Chair.
National Treasury and then AG.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe if I can just come in with regard to the 4 billion rand. That is money that was transferred or swept to Johannesburg Water, and 1st July, that money was transferred back to the City of Johannesburg. So that money is then, or was not available then to pay additional creditors or to be transferred to Johannesburg Water. Then secondly, as the sweeping arrangements, there's no specific guidelines. Currently, obviously, it is important that the entities generated surpluses and that surpluses be ring-fenced. But there isn't any arrangement or a guideline that is being created to say what is the amount of money that should be remain within the City of Johannesburg based on a deficit of property rates and general services, and what portion of trading services must then be financed to the city, and the rest of the money should then be allocated or ring-fenced back to the entities. So currently, we are currently busy with the city to actually develop that guideline and then sign a service level agreements with the entities. And then with the implementation of the trading service reform, obviously that arrangement will then, the amounts will then have to be increased over a period of time to the extent that the full amount is then ring-fenced to the trading services going forward. But we're currently in discussion with the city to implement that plan of action. Thanks, Chair.
AG.
Thank you, Chair. Treasury did cover me on the part of the 4 billion, so I'll speak onto the invoices. We do assess the difference between the small and the large invoices, and our audit is risk-based. So we do assess the risk of risk-based on terms of suppliers and the main business of the entity. So we do look at mostly large invoices, and also assess as well the root cause of the non-payments. So we are also having engagements in the current audits with management in terms of assessing further whether the delays that are seeing in the projects that are long outstanding, that it is really in terms of the sweeping arrangement. But currently, what management have cited is the cash flow, which is from the supplier side. But we will also look into further in terms of any other specifics, especially relating to the sweeping arrangement.
Thank you for that. I just want to ask and just make a statement quickly before I give back to the Honourable Moore. When we had a meeting with Johannesburg Water and we visited some sites there, we realized that Johannesburg Water and the City of Johannesburg, or the Metro, is setting up emerging contractors for failure, for not paying them. And in this time where we want to engage with and make sure that we've got new contractors coming to the front and establishing their businesses, this is not the right way of dealing with this. And then the question that I want to raise is that if the money is available, as the National Treasury says, they've transferred it back. If I've got a 10 billion overdraft, I can also transfer it back tonight, and tomorrow I take it back again. It does not mean that you utilize your overdraft to do that. It doesn't mean that money was available. You've utilized it somewhere else and you go into your overdraft. But let that be what it is. The problem is, how are we going to make sure, and how can we get assistance from National Treasury? And I know it's not your work, but how can we make sure that we don't put up emerging contractors for failure for not paying contractors? Is there anything that you can suggest that should be done to make sure that that don't happen? Thank you. Can we answer that? And then, Honourable Moore, I believe you were not satisfied. Well, I think they still need to answer you more specific on the questions. Honourable Moore?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy for them to answer you, but I do need to raise some further questions. So how about let them answer your question, and then I'll come in again. Thanks, Chair.
Are you satisfied with the response you received?
No, Chair. I'm actually very concerned about the response I received.
Can you deal with that now, please?
Sure, certainly. So to start off with, National Treasury and AGSA both concurred on the 4 billion rand, and I believe the statement was, Chair, that the 4 billion rand was swept back in the 1st of July. As you and I are both aware, because we ran a PIA request, because we had similar statements from the City of Johannesburg, we ran a PIA request on Johannesburg Water's accounts to see whether this was the case. And it is not the case. The 4 billion rand was not brought in or taken out of the accounts on the 30th of June or on the 1st of July. And maybe it was a mistake by the speaker, but it was concurred to by the AGSA, which leaves me very concerned because it's the same line that was said by the city. And this 4 billion rand is a problem. And if we want to know why we keep revisiting this number and this city, it's because it's a problem. To take it further, Chair, I actually have some of the financials on the debt to service providers, the late debt to service providers. And as far as I understand, in terms of the major contractors, this total sum of the debt is more than 10 times the small Joburg Water errors. So when we're presented with a number that says 30% is due to the sweeping arrangement, 70% is due to the Joburg Water's internal problems, but the actual Joburg Water's internal problems are less than a tenth of the size in terms of absolute capital amount, as compared to the contracts that we're concerned about, the major contracts. It's providing an incorrect picture. And I am concerned about the responses we have received, because it is absolutely critical that National Treasury and AGSA are on top of this issue. And the information we have from PIA requests and access to various reports from various, as I'm sure you're aware, Chair, there's a huge number of civil organizations who are getting information from all over the place. I'm concerned, Chair, about the way it's been answered. I have other questions. I'll wait for my turn after Honourable Kielwe, but the responses we've got were challenging. Both, I understand if National Treasury doesn't have any regulations on sweeping, although I will also caution, Chair, on that one, where they say that Joburg Water has, Joburg has indicated a willingness to move away from sweeping. What it sounded like in the room when we met with Joburg was that they were going to negotiate with National Treasury because they weren't entirely keen. They said, of course, they support it, but they were going to negotiate with National Treasury. And my ears, after decades of civil service, makes me worry that negotiate was we actually would quite like to keep sweeping for as long as possible. So in terms of all three of these responses, I'm concerned because we need National Treasury and AGSA to, I don't want to say go hard on this entity, but we need to be sure, because all indications are raising huge red flags. I'm going to stop here, Chair, but I hope you can hear that I was not pleased about those responses. Thank you.
National Treasury and AG.
Chair, let me come in from the AG side. Apologies, I raised my hand.
You're welcome. You're more than welcome.
Yeah, and thank to the honorable member Moore there. I can hear where he's coming from. So my colleague did explain in terms of our understanding of the sweeping arrangement that this is a long time arrangement done for treasury basis, and the reason why the city did it then and why it continued with it up to date. So if one has to look at the question at hand, whether or not there is a 4 billion rand cash in the books of the City of Johannesburg, based on the financial statements that we have, that we're still auditing up until the end of as at the end of June, the cash balance of the City of Johannesburg, it is less than the 4 billion. What we know as auditors is that the 4 billion rand, it is accounted for correctly. So in the books of the city, they do acknowledge that they owe Johannesburg Water the 4 billion rand. In as much as in the books of Johannesburg Water, there is an acknowledgement that there is a 4 billion rand that they are being owed by the city. So there is you've got a creditor and a debtor, if you have to look at it in that simple accounting term. So both the two entities acknowledge that one owes the other, one is being owed. So that for us as auditors, we tick the box to say, look, the financial statement very present. Cindy spoke about to say, if you look at the operation of the entity, you look at the cash flow that we are auditing, you could see that they've got positive cash flow. So that's the cash flow book entry, meaning the entity itself, it's able to generate the right cash to sustain its operation. So there we said as auditors, we are auditing that, but we've confirmed that we are okay. We are okay. We are okay with that. So the issue, Chair, from us, we can clearly say the books of Johannesburg, City of Johannesburg, as that we closed end of June, the financial year, and they don't have the 4 billion, but they've accounted it for it correctly, Chair. I would like to pause there and Chair, deal with the issue that talks about the 30% and the 70%. So if you look at that issue, we're saying we need to confirm as part of our audit procedures whether the entity is able to make payments within 30 days. They're able to pay suppliers within 30 days. So on our sample, we picked up that the entity has challenges as a start. However, as we are following up to understand why suppliers are not paid within 30 days based on our sample, we noted that it's only about 30% which is affected by the sweeping arrangement. Because, Chair, our understanding is that when Johannesburg Water needs to pay suppliers, they submit a list of all the suppliers that needs to be paid to the city for request for funding to say, we want to pay X amount and the total. And the city will then allocate funding and make the payments necessary. So that is done at the city. It happens for all the entities within the city, same process. And for us, Chair, as we analyzed those reasons, we picked up that some of the suppliers were not paid, 70% of those were not paid due to the entities' inefficiencies, meaning the entities did not make sure that their processes are adequate to make sure that 70% of those suppliers are paid. Only about 30% of those that were not paid was because the city would have cited a cash constraint or any other reasons why those 30% of suppliers are not paid, Chair. Let me pause there, Chair. I hope we've answered adequately, Chair. Thank you.
We understand that it's bookkeeping exercise for you. National Treasury, you mentioned that the money was paid in, and the Honourable Moore said the PAIA application that he brought showed it was not paid in. Can you maybe comment on that, or is it not possible to comment on that now?
Maybe let me come and clarify it. So I think we're saying the same thing that the colleagues from AG are saying, not necessarily it was paid up. It can be accounted for on the books. The money had never, the Joburg Water did not receive that money. That money, it's sitting with the entity. Basically, that's what we are saying. Although you can trace that money went to the group, basically. In that regard. Secondly, in terms of the payments of invoice, as per the Municipal Finance Management Act, Section 65, subsection E, subsection 2E, the municipality is compelled to pay all the invoices within 30 days. So if the municipality is not paying the invoices, basically they are breaking the law in this regard. Thanks.
So in conclusion, the money is not available. It's available on books, but it's not available in the bank. All right, let's go to Honourable Kegakilwe.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, DM, AG, and the city, and the Treasury. Honorable members, good afternoon, and the support staff. Chairperson, I am also going to talk about the issue of the sweeping. Chairperson, regarding the sweeping arrangements, as per the best practice acting in the interest of the group and the institution, the residents. Based on this best practice, the money for the entity is deposited back into the account of the entity. But based on what AG has presented, the AG indicated that the presentation seems, the sweeping model seems not to be the case in the city, as there are huge disparities in terms of cash flow with key entities. For example, City Power, in some instance, it was running at a huge negative balance. Chairperson, the city is not doing what it's expected to do. And my first question with regard to this issue of the sweeping, what is the department doing about this conduct, as well as the Treasury? As government, I think we have the responsibility to ensure that despite the system used, the sweeping must be used correctly and it must be fully monitored. Chairperson, if I may recall, during our visit, the issue of the 4 billion was asked, and there were so many excuses. And we requested the bank statement of the Joburg Water. And we were told that they cannot retrieve it from the system. But now it has come clear that the city during our visit was lying to us. The city lied to us that the money is back to Joburg Water. And this behavior, the city must account for it. And the city manager and the executive manager, they must ensure that they do not treat their entities like all other departments. They must give them a space to perform their functions. And they can only intervene, Chairperson, when there are challenges or where services are not provided. But just to control their money like what is happening in the city, it is completely unacceptable, Chairperson. I'm going to go to the second question. The first one is, why did they lie to us? And what are they going to do with the situation? Because their sweeping is not working. Is there any intention of changing to other model or giving the entities their space to work? The second one is with regard to the issue of lack of sound service level agreement between the city and its entities. The agreement with clear revenue sharing. And this issue, Chairperson, of the service level agreement must be addressed as a matter of urgency. And from the presentation, it was clear that the gap has been identified, but we did not get as to what is going to be done to ensure that there is that a clear service level of agreement. And then the last one, Chair, with regard to the presentation, there is from the Joburg Water unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. They have that challenge. It was an audit finding and investigations were conducted, but up to now, there is no report. And they've indicated that the investigations have been conducted for the past 3 years. So what I want to get now is, what were the outcomes and what was the consequence management implemented there? Or did they just leave it like that? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think Joburg Water is not on here, so all the metros, so they can't answer that, but we will forward that question, and if anybody else could answer on that. AG, would you like to start? AG? Okay, let's go to National Treasury.
Thank you. I really didn't get the questions. I have noted mainly in the comments around the sweeping issue.
Yeah.
And the issue of lack of service, a sound service level agreement, which is an issue that the colleagues at Treasury spoke about. And then, as you said, the irregular expenditure and no report and consequence management is an issue for the entity. I really didn't note questions, Chair. Thank you very much.
National Treasury.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the sweeping arrangement, there were certain proposals presented to National Treasury from the city how to deal with it. A final recommendation will be implemented in December, as committed by the city. In terms of UIF, we were not happy with the way that the city have basically reduced unauthorized, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. That was not the case. And then the total amount, how did impact actually dealt with it. So we have submitted the Section 216 information to the city that they should provide detailed information to us, which we will assess, but we are not happy with that implementation. And then, Chair, yes, in terms of internal controls not been implemented, just for information. Basically, we look at credibility of information. If the city presented outstanding creditors at the end of June of 25 billion and then report to the principals that creditors is 11 billion by the end of September, indicating that 14 billion rand was actually paid, which is not correct. So credibility of information is a challenge. Cash flow management, obviously, we're looking at the city to improve on cash flow management, specifically to cash projections, cash projections with regard to the sweeping arrangement, contractor management, credit control measures. It is noted that the collection rate have increased, but the whole internal control system is basically falling apart. So this is being discussed with the city, and we're waiting for a final response in this regard. Thank you, Chair.
Can I maybe just ask where they have not given you the correct information? What is consequence management on this? How are you going to deal with that consequences? Or who deals with that?
Chair, obviously, we will continue to hold a quotable share, and there's a possibility for the end of December that will be released. And there's certain misconduct with regard to the accounting officer and the CFO and the manager. A report was also submitted to from the Minister of Finance to the Council, and no feedback was given up to date. So there is definitely mismanagement in terms of the Municipal Finance Management Act, and then obviously the non-adherence of Council to assist to correct the current position of the city. Thanks.
Yeah, the in question then would be whether that report has served before that council, but that we will not be able to answer. Honorable Kegakilwe, that was your responses?
Thank you, Chairperson. Regarding the issue of service level agreement through you, I will then request that the department must make it a point that there is that service level agreement between the city and its entities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable Ramayila.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to all participants on this platform. Maybe first I would want to start at a point where the current conjuncture as encapsulated in the two presentations from AGSA and National Treasury. And in my view, it really points to a positive trajectory that both Joburg City and Joburg Water have begun to take. And this, in my view, is illustrated by them embracing and even implementing the reforms. And I think from National Treasury that they have also already indicated, for example, that they have already started taking steps by making sure that that those officials that they transferred to Joburg City have been transferred back to Joburg Water. For me, that is quite a good move. It demonstrates to us the commitment ready to bring change that is desired. Now, regarding the sweeping arrangement and the 4 billion surplus, maybe let me first start with the fact of appreciating the fact that Joburg Water is solvent, is a going concern. It is able to make a surplus. We need to appreciate that and encourage them to do more in that instance. Now, in as far as sweeping arrangement is concerned, I think it's an objective reality now, as explained by National Treasury and AGSA as well, that is being used for cross-subsidization. Maybe what we may need to acknowledge that when doing that cross-subsidization, it's some sort of an open-ended process, because we would know for a fact that there will be certain entities that are not necessarily profitable. They will not make surplus. For instance, entities that are responsible for social amenities, it is known that those entities would necessarily not make any profits, and they would have to be subsidized to be maintained and function. That is the fact. Maybe the point that I might ask National Treasury and AGSA to look at as a recommendation is that this sweeping arrangement, like I'm said, is open-ended. It's supposed to be, for instance, look at ratios that need to be used, right? The ratio that needs to be used in the sense that even they do cross-subsidization, but there should not be, that will safeguard other entities. In this sense, what I mean is that those entities then should remain liquid. And all along, I had thought mainly the problem is as a result of the sweeping arrangement. But it's being said here factually. Factual reality is that 70% of non-payment within 30 days of the service providers rests with Joburg Water. Basically, that will be due to the internal financial management that is weak. It's not that effective and efficient. What is required is improvement in that regard. And they said only 30% is due to the sweeping arrangement. So my recommendation would that as part of the reform should be that even when sweeping arrangements are done, should not be open-ended. There should be certain ratios that should be used, that the sweeping arrangement, in terms of sweeping arrangement, a certain percentage or ratio should be retained within the entities, so that sweeping arrangement should not affect the financial viability in as far as liquidity ratios are concerned, or and all that. And therefore, the next part for me, I would wanted to talk about the issue of depreciation and CRR. So that in terms of these two, capital replacement reserve and the depreciation, that this objective should lie with the entities. In this case, Joburg Water should take responsibility for ensuring that the CRR, through depreciation, through interest, or whatever means, that will ensure that their CRR is cash back, so that responsibility should lie with the entity, not with the city. So that then, in terms of, it's indicated that the backlog in terms of infrastructure development, obviously is because the CRR sits with the city or not with Joburg Water. But if that could sit with Joburg Water, then Joburg Water will be able to have the capacity to constantly be able to replace the assets in terms of those that are old and so on. I thought that might be something important that we need to look at. But also, in as far as ring-fencing is concerned, ring-fencing is, I want to talk about it on two ways. The first thing is that ring-fencing goes with separation of functions, WSA and WSP. Now, the fact of the matter is that the separation of functions has been done by the fact that we've got Joburg Water as a water service provider. The part that might be lacking there is the part of ring-fence that I've partly spoken to when I talk about the sweeping arrangement, is in as far as ring-fencing the income. But that income is also in a way ring-fenced. It's only a portion that we need to deal with that, because it's ring-fenced, because even the collection and so on is done by the Joburg Water. We only need to, like I've said, in terms of sweeping arrangement, there must be ratios that even when they do sweeping arrangement, certain ratios, certain percentage of money for the liquidity of the entities should remain with those entities and should not be affected by the sweeping arrangement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. National Treasury.
Thanks, Chair. I think we are in agreement with the principles around the sweeping arrangement, that it shouldn't be abused. Basically, it should be done in such a way that it allows the entity to function quite optimally. And I think the member here, Mr. Honorable Ramaila, is raising those issues quite sharply, which we agree with that approach. I think what is quite important, even in terms of the implementation of the reform, it's for the municipality in particular, not even to take the money that it's in the trading services, but to ensure that that money is used to refinance the capital investment that is required for the service itself, given that if there is no investment in the service, the quality of service then deteriorates quite significantly. And it affects the residents, and therefore it's quite important that the money that it's generated in the trading service itself, it's used adequately for the trading service survival, to ensure that the quality of service that people continue to receive is of higher standard. Thanks.
AG, would you like to add on?
Chair, thank you. Yeah, I want to stick to what we do. Ours is to audit, not necessarily maybe agree, but we note the comments, Chair, that have been made. Let me pause it.
Thank you very much. Honorable Ramaila.
I'm happy, sir. Thank you.
Honorable Moore.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much for the session. This has been really excellent. 3 questions. First, to National Treasury, in your presentation, you mentioned that there are reforms to provide incentives for municipalities to make good decisions. Is there any consideration towards implementing reforms towards consequences for making bad decisions? Because accountability, I think, is key to resolving this issue. The second question is to both the AG and National Treasury. Does this sweeping arrangement of huge amounts of money, particularly as we've discovered, the 4 billion isn't even there if the city doesn't even have 4 billion across the entire city, does sweeping of huge amounts violate the MFMA provisions regarding council having to approve budgets and major changes to budgets? And then the last one, Chair, is more of a request. Can we ask for a report from the AG just for clarity on these invoices? I think it would be really helpful if they could go back and recheck and send us info on the rand value of invoices for which payments were delayed due to sweeping versus rand value of invoices that were delayed by Joburg Water internal issues. Because again, my understanding is that, it's not a 30-70 split, it's a massively different. And it would be really helpful to see that from the AG, who hopefully, then I'm not getting the information from a third source. We can get it from the auditors themselves, who hopefully have a more clear set of information on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, AG.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the question, Chair, if I may just repeat it, the question is whether or not the sweeping arrangement violates the MFMA. From our side, Chair, we haven't found such, but it could be an element of the fact that we haven't scoped in that particular legislation. I would like to I would like to go check, if there's any particular arrangement in the MFMA that deals particularly with this with an arrangement like this one, because over the years I haven't seen such. But we can double check. We've been auditing the city for a while, and this arrangement has been here. We really haven't found such, but we can double check. Even with that chair said, it's something that is not really scoped in legislation. What I'm talking about is something that is part of the laws and regulations that we audit and report on, or decided to report on in terms of the directive. It's not something that we are looking at as an office. But in summary, we'll have to double check whether or not it does, and then we can come back to the committee. Then, Chair, the request for invoices, we will communicate, Chair, as such in terms of that, but so that we from an expectation point of view, the information we were sharing, Chair, is the information based on our 23-24 audit. We're still finalizing the 24-25 audit, which we should finalize by the end of November, and then the tabling happens in the end of January. So we will we'll see if that information can or cannot be shared in terms of the invoices for 23-24, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. National Treasury.
So if I may come in, Chair. So with respect to the consequences for bad decisions, there will be a huge consequences this time. As we said, part of the reform basically comes with the incentives for good and a bad for good and a bad decision making. And if the municipality continue to go on a trajectory that basically lead to bad decision making, which basically lead to the underperformance of its trade and services, in simple term, that it's that they are not going to get the grants, they are not going to get the money. So there will be a direct impact on the municipality, which will require the entire ecosystem in the municipality to actually take consequences across the city, especially on the people that are not doing what they are expected to perform. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Honorable Moore, that is the responses that you have received.
Chair, thank you. I think this has been very important, and I'm sorry for I know I have a bit of a tone here, but I think the challenge that we've experienced with regards to this whole process is a series of pieces of information that require us to dig and dig and dig. And what's important here today is we have found out that, in fact, the 4 billion rand in cash does not exist, that it is on the books and not in the bank. And I appreciate that clarity, because Joburg was at a very hard effort to not admit that to the committee. And this is why it's important that as national government, we work with our entities, AGSA and National Treasury. And I truly appreciate the inputs from the teams who've been here today. This is really important. It's important, as I said, for the importance of Johannesburg as our economic hub. And I think this is going to make a big difference for our oversight moving forward. So, Chair, thanks for organizing the session. And again, happy with those last responses.
Thank you very much. Any other member that would go for a last round of questions? It seems there's nobody. Colleagues, as I've said to Joburg Water, and my colleague has said, this is not to nail Joburg. This is to make sure that the economic hub of South Africa is working. I told the mayor of Johannesburg that if Joburg fails, South Africa will fail. And therefore, it is important for us to make sure that we get Johannesburg on the correct track. Once and for all now, we understand that the 4 billion is only on a loan account. It is not available on request, or the full amount is not available on request. And my plea is that we as a collective, where National Treasury is the front runner with this, and the legislation that we will have to pass in Parliament very quickly, the amendments, to make sure that we get Joburg Water run as a business. I understand that there should be a ratio of money that must go to Joburg, but that is by way of agreement, because there will always be cross-subsidization to other entities. But we cannot get to a point where we need billions to fix our infrastructure, and the billions are lying on a loan account. It should have been available. And the mere fact is, if we continue with this next year, like City Power, the Joburg Water will also not make money. And then we are in big trouble. You know, when you don't have electricity, you can make a plan. If you don't have water, you're in trouble. And I really appreciate the fact that we had this meeting with you. The committee will now discuss the way forward, maybe getting Joburg Water back with National Treasury and COCTA, and see what plan could be put on the table to get everybody on the same level and taking Joburg forward, making sure that the people of Joburg, the community of Joburg, have water in their taps. And that is the crucial role of the Department of Water and Sanitation and this portfolio committee, to live out our motto is water is life, sanitation is dignity. And that is what we as a committee is striving for, and what Joburg needs to strive for. And therefore, my thanks to all you to be here this afternoon. I'm going to ask the Deputy Minister whether he would like to close from his side as the representative of Water and Sanitation, and then we can close this meeting. Minister Maslobo?
Chairperson, thank you so much. On the way we have concluded the matters from my side, I'm very happy. And we feel supported by yourself. And Johannesburg Water can't fail, as we are saying. And these reforms, the concrete plans that needs to be in place, so that at least we know that the little that they collect is invested back, and Rand Water is also going to be coming closer to them. There are discussions and how we're going to support them. Bigger investment like the development in Lanseria, they need to be unlocked. And the issues of water, those are some of the impediments that are going through. But on behalf of the Minister, we want to say thank you so much.
Thank you very much to all the members and colleagues on this platform. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I now adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you, Chair.